Are the United Arab Emirates a safe place to do business? On the map of the world, there are a handful of states that look less like traditional political organisms and more like carefully engineered economic projects. The United Arab Emirates is one of them. At first glance, the country seems to embody an economist's dream: a stable currency, no personal income tax for many types of business activity, modern infrastructure, airports that rank among the world's largest logistical hubs, and an international business community that attracts capital from almost every continent. Yet behind the facade of Dubai's glass towers and Abu Dhabi's futuristic developments lies a far more complex picture. The UAE is at once one of the safest and one of the most politically controlled places in the world in which to do business. It is precisely this paradox that leads many investors to ask a difficult question. Is the stability offered by this Gulf state a durable economic foundation, or rather a structure dependent on the delicate geopolitical balance of the region? The history of the United Arab Emirates is relatively short. The federation was established in 1971 after Britain withdrew from the Persian Gulf region. 7 emirate monarchies, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, Sharjah, Ajman, Al Quwain, Ras Al Khaimah, and Fujairah, chose to form a common state whose foundation would rest on economic cooperation and security, guaranteed by local ruling dynasties. Unlike many Middle Eastern states that passed through turbulent periods of revolution and war in the second half of the 20th century, the Emirates chose the path of economic pragmatism. The ruling families understood very quickly that oil wealth, however vast, would not last forever. As early as the 1990s, they began a process of economic diversification. Dubai, which possesses far less oil than Abu Dhabi, became the laboratory of that strategy. A 3-pillar economic model emerged. The first pillar was logistics and international trade. Jebel Ali Port in Dubai became one of the largest container ports in the world. Dubai International Airport was transformed into a global transport hub linking Europe, Asia, and Africa. The second pillar was tourism and the service sector. The Emirates built an image of luxury, modernity, and security. Over the course of just a few decades, a desert region was turned into one of the world's most important tourist destinations. The third pillar was the creation of financial centers. Dubai and Abu Dhabi began building financial districts of their own, intended to compete with London or Singapore. As a result, special economic zones emerged with legal systems based on common law principles. For investors from Europe and North America, this sent a clear signal. The Emirates wanted to play by the rules of global capitalism. At the same time, however, the political system remained an absolute monarchy. Power in the Emirates is concentrated in the hands of a few ruling families, above all the Al Nahyan dynasty in Abu Dhabi and the Al Maktoum dynasty in Dubai. In practice, this means that the country's political stability rests not on democratic institutions, but on equilibrium among ruling elites and on the state's immense financial resources. This political model has consequences for business. On the one hand, investors are offered an unusually predictable regulatory environment. Political decisions are made quickly, and the state is capable of carrying out major infrastructure projects at extraordinary speed. In the span of little more than a decade, the Emirates built metro systems, ports, airports, technology zones, and dozens of new business districts. On the other hand, the absence of democratic mechanisms of oversight means that the final guarantor of stability is the will of those in power. The system works for as long as the state's elites remain aligned on the direction of the country's development. For the moment, everything suggests that this strategy is working. The UAE is now one of the wealthiest countries in the world on a per capita basis. Its sovereign wealth funds manage assets worth hundreds of billions of dollars. State institutions invest in technology, renewable energy, the space industry, artificial intelligence, and global logistics. At the same time, the Emirates conduct an exceptionally pragmatic foreign policy. They maintain close ties with the United States, develop economic cooperation with China, expand technological partnerships with Israel, and at the same time preserve commercial links with Iran. For business, this means one thing above all else: access to a market connected to nearly every major economic center in the world. But that model also has a darker side. The Gulf region remains one of the most geopolitically unstable areas of the world. In the Emirates' immediate neighborhood lie Iran, Yemen, Iraq, and Saudi Arabia, states with sharply divergent strategic interests. In recent years, tensions between Iran and the Gulf states have repeatedly produced military incidents in the waters of the Persian Gulf. Drone attacks on oil installations in Saudi Arabia and the war in Yemen have shown that the region's energy infrastructure remains a potential target. For many companies, this means that geopolitical risk has to be built into any serious investment strategy. And yet the paradox is that precisely in such moments, some sectors of the economy may actually benefit. When global tensions rise, the importance of logistical and financial hubs tends to rise with them. In recent years, the Emirates have become a place where firms from different countries try to reorganize supply chains, rebuild trade structures, and reposition themselves in a world shaped by sanctions and strategic fragmentation. In practice, this means that Dubai has become one of the most important points on the map of world trade. When one speaks with entrepreneurs operating in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, one word appears very quickly: ecosystem. Over many years, the Emirates built their economy not as a collection of accidental sectors, but as a network of mutually reinforcing logistical, financial, and technological systems. In practical terms, that means that an entrepreneur who decides to relocate operations to the UAE enters an environment designed to minimize bureaucratic friction and maximize the flow of capital. Dubai, within that system, functions as a laboratory of capitalism. The city has spent years building a reputation as a place in which almost any business idea can find room to grow. Unlike many countries in the region, where state-owned conglomerates dominate, Dubai's economy rests to a large extent on private initiative. In practice, that means an enormous number of small and medium-sized firms operating in international trade, logistics, technology, and financial services. A key element of that system is the network of special economic zones. They are, to a very large degree, responsible for the Emirates' reputation as one of the most business-friendly places in the world. In many such zones, companies are allowed to retain full ownership, something that only a few decades ago was rare in Arab states. In addition, entrepreneurs benefit from simplified administrative procedures and specially designed tax arrangements. For many investors from Europe, however, the greatest advantage is something else: predictability. In a world where business regulations can change from year to year, the Emirates try to project an image of stability. The authorities understand very well that investor confidence is one of the most valuable assets in the economy. That is why legal changes are usually introduced gradually and are often preceded by lengthy consultations with the private sector. This is especially visible in the financial sector. In recent years, the Emirates have begun to build their position as a regional center for financial technology. In Dubai and Abu Dhabi, dedicated regulatory environments have been created for fintech firms, allowing them to test new solutions within controlled legal frameworks. For startups, this means the ability to develop financial products without having to pass through years of licensing procedures. At the same time, however, the entire system functions according to a very specific social contract. The Emirates offer entrepreneurs stability and security, but in return, they expect absolute respect for local political and cultural rules. In practice, that means firms operating in the UAE must move very carefully in the public sphere. Criticism of the authorities, involvement in political matters, or conduct that could be seen as violating social norms may lead to serious consequences. For many Western entrepreneurs, this is one of the greatest paradoxes of the Emirates. On the one hand, the country promotes itself as one of the most cosmopolitan places in the world. In Dubai, one hears dozens of languages, and foreigners make up a very large share of the population. On the other hand, the political system remains highly closed and tightly controlled. This duality is also visible in the structure of the economy. Although the Emirates have built a powerful private sector, many strategic industries remain under direct state control or under the influence of ruling families. This applies above all to the energy sector, critical infrastructure, and parts of the financial market. In practice, that means the largest economic projects are often carried out in partnership with state institutions. For entrepreneurs, this can be both an opportunity and a challenge. Partnership with the state opens access to enormous infrastructure and investment projects. At the same time, it requires the ability to navigate a system in which personal relationships and reputation play an enormous role. The Emirates' particular demographic structure is also significant. The majority of the population consists of foreign nationals, workers from South Asia, Europe, Africa, and other parts of the Middle East. This model allows the economy to function in an exceptionally flexible way. The labor market can adapt quickly to the needs of infrastructure projects, technology investments, or the service sector. Yet the same model also raises questions about long-term social stability. In the Emirates, there is a clear divide between citizens of the state and the vast population of foreign workers. Citizens benefit from broad social support systems, while many migrant workers function under much more limited legal conditions. For business, this means operating within a system that is at once extremely efficient economically and highly specific socially. Firms can take advantage of a dynamic labor market and a global logistical network, but they must also take into account local, cultural, and regulatory realities. In recent years, the Emirates have also begun investing more visibly in new technologies. The authorities openly speak of transforming the country into one of the world's major centers for artificial intelligence and the digital economy. Government programs support the growth of technology startups, while state funds invest in renewable energy, robotics, and the space sector. Many analysts see those sectors as the future of the Emirati economy. Oil remains an important source of income, but its relative significance in the economy is gradually declining. The Emirates are trying to build a model of a state that can function as a global center of technology, finance, and logistics even in a world beyond the age of fossil fuels. Yet the more the country opens itself to global capital and technology, the more it becomes part of global economic tension. The Emirates must balance among the interests of the United States, China, Europe, and the states of the region. That delicate equilibrium is becoming one of the key factors shaping the future of business in the UAE. In the third part of this story, one has to descend from the level of shining skyscrapers and investment brochures to a layer that is discussed far less often in promotional materials. Because if the United Arab Emirates is one of the most stable and predictable places in the region in which to do business, that is not because the Middle East has suddenly become calm. Quite the opposite. The Emirates' stability exists precisely because the country has learned how to function in an environment of permanent uncertainty. For decades, the Middle East has remained one of the world's most important geopolitical flashpoints. One only has to look at a map to understand why investors are simultaneously drawn to Dubai and Abu Dhabi, while also analyzing the region with great caution. To the north lies Iran, a state of enormous strategic significance that has long remained in tension with the West and with part of the Gulf Order. To the south, the war in Yemen continues, even if it no longer appears on the front pages every day, and remains one of the most brutal conflicts of the modern era. More broadly, the region includes Iraq, Syria, and other politically unstable areas whose future remains uncertain. In such a geopolitical environment, the United Arab Emirates has built a strategy that many analysts describe as pragmatic balancing. The country maintains close strategic relations with the United States while simultaneously developing economic cooperation with China, building technological partnerships with Europe and Israel, and without entirely closing commercial channels with Iran. This multi-directional foreign policy model matters enormously for business. The Emirates seek to be a place where capital from different parts of the world can meet, even when the states behind that capital remain in tension with one another. In practice, that has made Dubai one of the most important global nodes of commercial intermediation. In economics, there is a concept known as the intermediary economy. It refers to places that do not necessarily produce vast quantities of goods themselves, but are crucial to the movement of those goods. Singapore, Hong Kong, and Panama have long functioned in precisely that role. The Emirates are attempting to play a similar role at the junction of Europe, Asia, and Africa. In times of stability, this means dynamic growth in logistics and international trade. But in times of tension and conflict, such a position can become even more profitable. When global trading systems begin to fracture, demand rises sharply for places capable of acting as neutral economic hubs. Dubai has spent years building a reputation as a city in which almost any trade can find a path forward. Of course, the state seeks to maintain formal compliance with international financial standards, yet its economy remains extraordinarily flexible. It is precisely that flexibility that explains why, in moments of global commercial crisis, the Emirates often experience economic booms. A good example is the period following sanctions imposed on Russia. Many firms that had previously operated in Eastern Europe began relocating part of their activities to Dubai. The city became one of the principal places in which global commercial and financial structures were reorganized. Russian entrepreneurs, European logistics firms, and Asian investors began constructing new networks of cooperation in the Emirates. A similar phenomenon can be observed in trade linked to Iran. Although many transactions between Iran and the West are formally restricted, Dubai has for years remained one of the most important intermediate points in commerce involving that country. Hundreds of logistics and trading firms handle the movement of goods between the Persian Gulf and the rest of the world. Conflict, sanctions, and geopolitical tension often give rise to new economic niches. Firms specializing in logistics, financial intermediation, or supply chain reorganization can, under such conditions, generate enormous profits. That does not mean, of course, that the Emirates are free of risk. Quite the opposite. In recent years, the Gulf region has repeatedly found itself on the edge of serious military escalation. Drone attacks on oil installations in Saudi Arabia and incidents in the waters of the Persian Gulf have shown how vulnerable regional energy infrastructure remains. For companies operating in the Emirates, this means that crisis scenarios must be built into planning. Many multinational firms maintain regional risk management centers in Dubai that monitor political developments across the wider region. The paradox, however, is that even in moments of tension, Dubai often remains one of the safest places in the region. One reason is the very high level of investment in security. For years, the Emirates have devoted enormous resources to defense systems, surveillance technologies, and intelligence cooperation with Western states. The country has built the image of a place capable of effectively protecting both its citizens and foreign investors. At the same time, the authorities understand very well that economic stability is one of the most important components of national security. That is why they respond rapidly to any signal that might weaken investor confidence. During global crises, the Emirati government has repeatedly introduced support packages for the private sector. This ability to react quickly is one of the greatest strengths of the Emirati political model. In democratic states, economic decisions often require prolonged parliamentary negotiation. In the Emirates, key decisions can be taken in a very short period of time. From the standpoint of investors, this creates an environment that is both highly stable and highly flexible. Yet the same characteristic also raises questions about the long-term future of the Emirati model. If the country's stability rests primarily on the strength of the ruling institutions and on enormous financial resources, then one must ask how the system will function in a world where the global economy begins to change faster than before. For now, however, everything suggests that the Emirates understand the logic of contemporary capitalism extremely well. The state seeks to be at once a center of the technologies of the future and one of the most important hubs of global intermediary trade. It is precisely this combination that explains why, despite the geopolitical tensions of the wider region, Dubai and Abu Dhabi remain among the most dynamic places in the world in which to do business. And for many firms, it is precisely in such non-obvious spaces of the global economy that the greatest opportunities arise. If one looks at statistics on business migration in recent years, one pattern appears with surprising regularity. More and more companies from Europe, Asia, and Africa are moving operations to Dubai or Abu Dhabi. This does not always mean a complete relocation of the business. Often it means establishing a regional headquarters, a logistical center, or a financial structure that makes it possible to handle international trade from the Persian Gulf. This movement is not accidental. For years, the United Arab Emirates has pursued one of the most consistent capital attraction strategies in the world. The authorities understood that in the global economy of the 21st century, the most valuable resource is no longer only oil or port infrastructure. The most valuable resource is mobile capital, companies capable of moving operations from one continent to another in a matter of months. To attract such capital, the Emirates created a system that for many entrepreneurs looks almost like the economic equivalent of a high-speed highway. In many economic zones, the process of establishing a company takes only a few days. In many cases, the entrepreneur does not need a local partner, and administrative procedures can be handled almost entirely online. At the same time, the state offers something that is becoming harder to find in many parts of Europe: a sense of predictability. In recent years, entrepreneurs in many parts of the world have had to deal with rapid regulatory change, rising taxes, inflation, and increasingly complex bureaucratic systems. Dubai has used that moment with remarkable awareness. The city began promoting itself as a place where entrepreneurs can operate in a stable, predictable, growth-oriented environment. Emirati promotional campaigns are increasingly aimed not only at large corporations, but also at medium-sized business owners, freelancers, and technology startups. One of the most important elements of this strategy is the system of investor visas and so-called golden residency visas. These programs allow entrepreneurs and specialists from around the world to obtain long-term residence in the Emirates in exchange for investment, business activity, or work in sectors considered strategic. For many entrepreneurs from Europe, this represents a major shift. In many European Union states, running a business is increasingly tied to rising regulatory costs, high taxes, and a more and more complicated legal environment. Dubai offers an alternative vision of the economy, a system in which the state seeks to act as a partner to business rather than primarily as its regulator. This does not, of course, mean the absence of regulation. In recent years, the Emirates has introduced new financial oversight mechanisms and anti-money laundering systems in order to align itself with international standards. Yet the style of regulation remains different from that found in many Western countries. Rather than building an expansive culture of control, the state seeks to preserve a balance between oversight and commercial freedom. This approach is especially attractive to the technology sector. In Dubai and Abu Dhabi, dozens of new technology hubs, startup incubators, and research centers linked to artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and the space industry are emerging. The Emirates are attempting to create an environment in which technology entrepreneurs can grow projects in direct cooperation with state investment funds. Yet, beneath this dynamic vision of the economy lie less obvious challenges as well. One of them is the specific nature of the local legal system. Although in many economic zones the governing law is based on common law principles, in other parts of the economy there remain legal elements characteristic of the region. For entrepreneurs, this means that understanding exactly which jurisdiction governs their activity is crucial. Another challenge concerns business relationships themselves. In Emirati business culture, reputation and trust play an enormous role. Many economic decisions are made not solely on the basis of financial analysis, but also on the basis of relationships among business partners. For entrepreneurs from Europe or North America, this means adapting to a style of negotiation that places great emphasis on building long-term personal relationships. At the same time, however, it is precisely that culture of relationships that allows the Emirates to attract projects of enormous scale. In Dubai, infrastructure investments are launched that in many countries would require years of negotiation and political dispute. In the Emirates, decisions concerning the construction of new business districts, ports, or technology centers can be made in much shorter time. This economic model works especially well in periods of global transformation. World trade is now passing through one of its greatest reorganizations since the end of the Cold War. Supply chains that for decades linked Europe, Asia, and North America in a relatively stable production system are beginning to change. Companies are searching for new logistics hubs, new financial centers, and new places in which to operate. Dubai is trying to be one of the principal beneficiaries of that shift. The city offers entrepreneurs something that is increasingly difficult to find in many parts of the world: a combination of global logistical infrastructure, relatively low taxation, and a very high level of security. Yet this model of capital attraction also raises questions about long-term durability. As more and more firms move activity to the Emirates, competition inside the region also intensifies. Dubai becomes a place where companies from all over the world meet, often competing for the same markets and projects.